This is Ellen, and we are students in Johan Süte Institute of Political Studies, University of Tartu. And we're really honored to be here and present our survey, so thank you for inviting us. And what did we do? We conducted a qualitative survey, generally on Estonian youth and politics in general, and Estonian youth and political awareness. And how did we do it? We carried out two different focus group interviews. I did one in Rakvere Secondary School, and Ellen did one in Tallinn French School. I had 8 students, and Ellen had 7 students. And our survey is based on the results of these interviews.
So, first, we asked students what do they generally associate with politics, and we found that the results were largely very negative. It was a lot of cheating politicians, it was corruption, it was anger, it was disappointment. People felt there was a lack of transparency. So, but they did mention some quite neutral terms, such as elections, the government, Riigikogu, parliament, but yes, there were no positive connotations with politics at all.
And when asking what are the most interesting topics in politics for students, they answered education, some different social movements, and some even mentioned foreign affairs and international conflicts. At the time when I was conducting this interview, it was very timely in Estonia called sugar tax. So the government planned to add some taxes to products that had too much sugar in those. So students mentioned that, and they didn't necessarily agree with this tax, and they found it a bit confusing. But mostly, what it seems to me that matter to students are the political decisions that have like direct impact on students' lives. For example, in Rakvere, there was and still is an issue where they're planning to establish a state-owned school in Rakvere. So the local government wants to build a new house for the new school, yet the current Rakvere Secondary School students are against building the new house. They think that this state-owned school should be established in the current secondary school building. So they actually protested against the new building, which you can see in the next picture. So they formed a human chain around the current school and had like different posters to give out this idea that they don't want a new building in the city. Because if they would build a new building, then this school would be turned into just primary school, and they don't think that it's a good idea.
And we asked the students to define what they understand by being politically aware and what does it mean to them. And most of them define this as simply being aware of daily news, keeping up with the news, knowing who is the prime minister, who are the ministers of education, foreign affairs and such. And we conducted our focus group interviews in spring 2017, and this was when the debate about fake news and being critical of media was a bit more relevant than it is today. So that was one of their main points, that being politically aware to them is more about being critical of the political news they consume rather than being aware of the facts. And they personally didn't really feel that they had enough political awareness to take part in national politics.
I also asked in my interview what are students' thoughts about political ideologies? Do they know anything about it, about these, and do they think that they will base their voting decision on political ideologies? Students mentioned liberalism, conservatism, and left-right scale. Yet students mentioned that they don't find it essential to know those ideologies, since they think that people their age don't have like fully developed ideologies for themselves also. They think it's like more of a mixed version. And what also was interesting here, that student mentioned that they don't like this idea where politicians hand out different gifts and like party merch. They said that this will have like opposite effect for students. They feel as if politicians try to buy their votes by giving them gifts. So yeah, that was interesting for me. But yeah, students estimated their knowledge about political ideologies insufficient, yet they said that they don't see it problematic.
And compared to their home life or the national news, students actually felt that for them, school is one of the most objective sources of information for them. And at the same time, they also felt that in developing political awareness, school for them hasn't been very useful. We are speaking about students who are in year 11 and year 12, so this is the last years of secondary higher education in Estonia. And in the Estonian national curriculum, there is a subject as ühiskonnaõpetus, which in English is
Social studies.
yeah, it's social studies or government. And they said that while they know that what are the functions of the government, how the elections work, what is democracy, they felt that the school didn't really impart on them the philosophical underpinnings behind these institutions. And at the same time, they also thought that something very hard to actually teach in a formal environment. Sorry. And the Tallinn French school is actually a special case because they have these tests every semester outside of the national curriculum, and several students actually thought that they learned more about Estonian politics studying for these tests than from the national curriculum.
And we talked more generally about different sources of information also, and the first not surprising answer was that the main source of information for students is social media, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, etc. This is where the young people get most of their information. They also mentioned some national newspapers, for example, Postimees in Estonia, and they said that they read the newspapers digitally also, but many students still have like monthly orders at home. And when I asked whether they stop at articles that are related to politics, then they said no, not usually. They also talked about discussing political topics at home, and most of the students said that it is rather difficult to have those discussions at home because they feel like there is a huge generation gap and they understand politics so differently. They said that especially it is difficult to talk with their grandparents because according to students, their grandparents are raised up in like brainwash Soviet time, so they feel that their grandparents still have like major impact from this era. And yes, they also mentioned that it is important to stay critical about sources. Some students even said that they think that there is always a threat that in popular newspapers they might be controlled or being under like some higher authorities which control what is written there. Yes.
And we, we also asked the students, very sorry, we also asked the students' general opinion about lowering the voting age to 16. This was before the local municipal elections, and very large majority of them said that yes, they completely agree with lowering the voting age to 16, and they thought this was something very important to them. And we also asked them to predict the probable voting activity among 16, 17-year-olds. Most of them said that at least 50% of them will probably vote, and some even said 60%, and this surprisingly actually fell in line with the actual results, which was 59%.
And to end this presentation, I would say that despite of those negative connotations such as corruption, etc., it seemed to me that students are interested in politics. At first I found it funny that they're waiting for schools to have like bigger role in growing the political awareness or knowledge, yet they are not willing to read voluntarily political articles. But I gave some second thought into it, and I thought that in political articles it is they are often hard to read because you have to have some previous knowledge. But if schools would give more to have that knowledge among students, then it would be also easier to read those articles to have some previous knowledge. Yes, it was interesting also that they predicted turnout pretty well. They predicted the turnout would be 50 to 60%, and the actual percent was 59. And I guess it shows that we can't say that students are not interested in politics. And what I would also like to say is something that Lauri also mentioned, that politics is basically life. And to me it seems also that students, even if they say that they are not interested in politics, they maybe not always understand that how wide-ranged like phenomena is politics. And there are some issues that matter to students, but they don't really understand that these are very tightly connected to political decisions.